Good afternoon. Today is April 24th, and today I'll continue to be talking about the coronavirus. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is that the COVID-19 has killed more than 10,500 residents and staff members at nursing homes and long-term care facilities nationwide, which accounts for nearly a quarter of the deaths in the United States from the pandemic. However, states are increasingly turning to nursing homes to relieve the burden on hospitals by forcing them to accept infected patients who are considered stable. So right now there's no evidence so far that the practice has allowed infections to spread in nursing homes, but many fear that it is only a matter of time. And a lawsuit in New Jersey claims that a nursing home worker who died was likely to have been sickened by a patient readmitted from a hospital. New York established a strict rule last month that nursing homes must readmit residents sent to hospitals with the virus and accept new patients deemed medically stable. So I personally think that this is absolutely ridiculous. States can't have just ignored a quarter of the deaths and infections coming from nursing homes, and nursing homes are considered at high risk, where their patients are almost always have a long-term medical condition. There are probably of the older population, and yet states are still forcing them to take on patients that the hospitals can't. And I think we have to remember here that nursing homes are also a kind of hospital essentially, and they're missing on the equipment that the hospital has, but have more risk than the hospitals themselves. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about today is that I want to talk about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. So this pandemic was about the most dangerous pandemic ever seen in the United States. It killed nearly 20 to 50 million people and has infected 500 million people worldwide, which is more than all the soldiers and civilians killed during World War I combined. And what happened during this pandemic is that this was just basically a virus strain that mutated and just wreaked chaos all over America. And I think that many people currently tend to forget about the pandemic, even though of these devastating numbers. Still people only either just distinctly remember it, or sometimes they just completely forget about it at all. And this is really surprising, because I think that it's probably maybe because that this pandemic was so horrible that people choose to forget about it, or that this was just considered a large failure of the United States, which could also, I guess, which can also cause people to completely forget about this pandemic. And so, brief history of the pandemic. This was a virus flu strain that started in the United States, and what happened was that right now, the United States was heavily invested in the war effort of the World War that was going on in Europe, and as a result, the United States sent large mass amounts of soldiers onto crowded ships to be shipped off to Europe. And this strain started and mutated at a soldiers camp in America. I forgot where, possibly Kansas. But either way, this virus, because it is an easily transmittable virus, it spread through the soldiers basically like quick fire. And the United States, actually what happened was that was so invested in the war effort that the American public and the government just wanted to keep the war going and signed up more soldiers and more soldiers into these crowded areas. And the press actually wasn't even allowed to write news articles about the pandemic, because the government was worried that it would affect the war effort. And there were protests. There were just mass gatherings going on about the war, and these gatherings also provide the absolutely perfect environment for the virus to transfer. So on the political side, the government chose to ignore the virus and chose the war effort, which caused the virus to spread. And on the biological side, biologists at the time had only heard of bacteria, and since viruses were like 100 times smaller, they didn't even know that there was a thing called the virus which caused the flu, and so it was really hard to come up with the treatment if you can't even see the virus itself. And so I think as a result, it ended terribly for the entire world. Just killed more soldiers than more people than all the soldiers in World War I combined. And I think these are also people at the time, they couldn't practice, they had no idea of quarantine or social distancing, and came up with all these weird efforts to try to contain the virus, which was obviously not working. And here another thing is just that I wanted to make sure is kind of warning about reopening, like also in San Francisco. Here, San Francisco is a prime example where they fought off the virus at the first time. The government and the public rejoiced. And weeks after, San Francisco had about the worst cases ever, because and at the end the government chose not to care about it. The government was just like, this is other travelers bringing the virus from them, it's going to pass away as the time goes on, and it did not, kill more people. And I think San Francisco at that time, 1918 pandemic, is a prime example of second wave of infections being more deadly than the first. Either way, I just hope that I informed you of this pandemic. If you're interested, you can learn more about it. But it was definitely one of the most it was the most dangerous and completely ignored pandemic almost by the entire public until it was too late. That's it. Thank you for listening.